Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mission Employable podcast. We're here on a very special day, the first episode of 2025 and our 200th episode.
Wow.
Kathy, we made it. We haven't gotten taken off the air or fired or any of those things, which is great because that means we have a whole nother year to bring you guys some information about the workforce here in Iowa and some of the priorities and some of the things that industries and companies are doing outside of our department to increase their workforce or find unique ways to solve problems, and we're very excited about it. Kathy,
yes.
Happy New Year.
Happy
Welcome
New
back,
Year.
2025.
Thank you. Yeah, big 2025, and we are ready to go. And hey, I just want to add to that, Ben, looking forward, we do have plans to go on the road.
Yep.
And our first stop hopefully will be Sioux City. It's planned for February, and we'll get some great guests from the Sioux City area. So we're looking forward to that, and we hope you'll stay tuned to listen and learn on that too.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, if that goes well, then my plan of going to Vegas with you will be on the way after that. We might have to finagle that with the finance department
That's
here,
right.
but who knows? Maybe we can find something to do out there.
That's right.
All jokes aside, we're very excited today because we have got Georgia Van Gundy here with us today. She is the new Deputy Director of Iowa Workforce Development. Big person in our office today. So, Georgia, welcome in to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, first of all, this might be the first time people are hearing your name here at IWD, and we just kind of want to get to know you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and it doesn't even have to be like career experience, just kind of like who you are and what you're about.
Yeah, well, actually, I was born and raised in Iowa, and not too far from here, actually. I was more east side of Des Moines and graduated from Southeast Polk, and I've just never left. I love Iowa, and, as we talk further, you'll probably hear that I have a passion for Iowa and making it a great place for people to live and work and raise a family. And so I have my family here. My husband's also from Iowa, grew up on a farm, and we have two children, one that's just started college and one that's getting ready to graduate from high school. So I'm also wanting to keep them here in
That's
Iowa
right.
when they're done. So, I love to work out and exercise. I love sports. My family loves sports, and so that's something that we all do together. But again, like I said, I have a lot of passion for the state of Iowa, and so I'm excited to be here and be part of this organization.
Awesome. Well, we're so glad to have you here with us.
Yes. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what your duties are as Deputy Director. Did I say that right? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I had to check myself there. I wanted to get it right. Deputy Director, tell us a little bit about what that role is and then what you're looking to accomplish in the first year.
Yeah. So for that role, I'm helping Director Townsend with running the agency as a whole. So that's one of the things that I am doing. But then also directly, I'm going to oversee our workforce and business assistance divisions and programs, and then the strategies that are involved with all those areas. So that's part of what my role is. In the first year, I'm hoping that I can help bring a different lens to the table with the background and experience that I have to just really take a look at the services that we already provide, and are there ways that we can improve those to meet our customers' needs, and how can we become a better partner for business and have them see us as the go-to organization to help solve their workforce needs.
That's awesome. And that really leads into then why don't you share a little bit about your previous experience, because I do think it's exciting to have someone with your background here in this role. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I actually have a degree in finance from Iowa State, so again, didn't go very far. And I started out in the banking and finance industry, and then I actually have had some time in state government, which I'll talk a little bit about that as well. I've had probably over 20 years of either in state government or around state government and working in that space. And then also I've worked for larger companies in the state. So I've worked for Principal Financial Group and then Hy-Vee. And then I've also worked for a couple of associations, and I also have led the Iowa Business Council. So a lot of experience with business and industry, a lot of experience with policy. and policy that impacts business and workforce, and then a lot of experience just working with businesses too. So it's just kind of a different background that I think was a good background to pair with this position.
I think so too. Great perspective, because as you indicated too, employers are we want to support them. We want to be a resource for them, and I always think it's valuable to have that perspective. Always.
Well, it's their number one issue.
Yeah.
Employers' number one issue is finding the right workforce. And at the end of the day, that's going to impact the population that we have. It's going to impact how our state can grow, because we need businesses to continue to grow in the state. And so, again, for me, I thought it's a great role to bring the different background and perspective I have too.
Yeah. So you come to us from the role of Chief Administration Officer for Hy-Vee, and 2024 Hy-Vee was the largest employer in the state of Iowa. What did that role kind of teach you about some of the hiring needs for these really large companies?
Well, one thing I think that it's always important for people to remember is, I think they think, just employers need people, but they all have their own unique challenges in their hiring. So if you think about Hy-Vee and its retail industry, so retail historically as an industry has a higher turnover. And so really thinking about, how are they having those strategies to attract the right employees, and then also having the right strategies to help keep them involved and employed with Hy-Vee. So, and that, it again creates a different challenge, because as a retailer, a lot of employers have time for their employees to have additional trainings and really understand the careers that are available. And in retail, it's a fast pace, and you're there, especially on the floor, working with customers. And so you have to try to fit some of these things in that will help keep employees there. So I think for them, that's a challenge, and helping employees really understand what are those career opportunities for them, because there's a lot of different ones, and all the training and education that goes to doing that. So I think those are some of the challenges that they have. I also think another unique challenge that retailers, or Hy-Vee in particular, has, they have 4 generations of people in the workforce. So they start hiring at age 14, and luckily for them, they have a lot of longevity. So they have people who have been there for 50 years. And so how are you addressing those needs of the workforce when you have 4 different generations of people within the workforce? So I do think that they have some unique challenges, but they've done some things to try to address it. They've put together apprenticeships. They're looking at internships and have developed some of those as well, and a lot of different work-based learning that they have for them.
Yeah, and that's really interesting too, because you talk about like the kind of the cross-generational learning, and like you have, like you said, maybe a 14-year-old working alongside someone who's been working there for 30, 40 years, right? And you have this apprenticeship model that lets you, transfer some of those skills over and get to know each other and like learn how each other operates and works when, socially you could be very different apart.
Yes, that's exactly right. And it's just really trying to get those generations to work together. I think that they actually do a great job of doing that. But again, you have, some generations that's used to doing everything on their phone and maybe don't have the best soft skills yet. And then you have other generations that are there that have really good soft skills and have learned that. And that's, one of the top things that employers are looking for is those soft skills. And so they do a good job of training each other within the day's work that they have.
Yeah. I just came upon an example, just speaking of that, because one of the things you said I think is really important, Georgia, is that and not only in the retail, but employers have entry-level positions. And so do the people coming into that know that that's a starting place for them, and then what can come next? And the reason I'm bringing that up, because I had an interesting conversation with somebody who was hired in the lab at a hospital as a support tech. So at entry level, they've done the training, and people are leaving because a couple of them are becoming radiology techs. Another one's doing a lab tech program. Another one's doing, and what this person said is, when I was hired, she told me this is a great starting place. Here, and not that you can't stay, but that was kind of set as an expectation, is that,
right.
This is a great starting place, but there are all kinds of other opportunities, and here's where they are, and then growing the employees from there. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think that's important, because you definitely, in any employer, you have those harder to fill positions. And those typically are going to be the ones that you're trying to train those people who have come in from an entry level to go into those harder to fill positions, especially in the state of Iowa, when we have such a low unemployment rate. We really have to be thoughtful, businesses, about taking individuals, growing them, training them for those hard to fill positions so that it opens up those ones that are easier for them to fill.
Yeah. So
What kind of experience do you have that allows you to kind of understand kind of the needs of some of these small businesses? Because you have a ton of experience with these large businesses and corporations, but the small businesses are obviously also a huge part of the kind of the workforce here.
Yeah. Well, I've been fortunate that I've worked for a small business, and then I've also had the opportunity to work with small businesses through my work through economic development. They have the same challenges, but then I think that they're more magnified because as a small business, it's harder to recruit people. It's harder to keep them because there may not be as much growth opportunity for them. They may not have the resources on staff to create the training and education that they need for those individuals. And also, I think the regulatory environment, they don't necessarily understand as well. So I think they're similar to larger companies, but I think that they're more exasperated because they're smaller. So I think spending more time helping them reach their needs is important. I mean, if you think about a small business, are they going to reach out to a school district to say, hey, I want to have work-based learning. I want to have students. They're probably not going to. So how's our role in helping those smaller businesses make that connection and help them feel comfortable with having those conversations? So again, I think that they just don't have as many resources, which is where I think that we can step in and be a good partner with them.
Right. I was literally just about to talk about like the resource difference between large and small businesses, and the idea that you can, as a small business, you can do a lot of the same stuff, apprenticeship programs, work-based learning, all that kind of stuff as the big guys do. But you might need a little bit more assistance in getting that up off the ground, and that's where we come in.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They may have one person that does HR, training, benefits, all of that, and they don't necessarily have the time to sit and design an apprenticeship program or, like I mentioned, be spending time with the school district.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so that is where we can step in and provide that assistance to small, I would even say medium-sized businesses.
Yes.
To help them do that. Now, on the flip side, I think large companies are really busy. And so they don't always necessarily stop and think about, yes, I should be working with my school district to build that pipeline and do some work-based learning. How do I provide that internship? How can I develop an apprenticeship to move people into those hard-to-fill positions? So I think they have the resources, but sometimes they don't have the opportunity to stop and really take a look at it. My time with the Iowa Business Council, we represented 23 of the largest employers in the state, and that was a key focus for the work that they were doing, is that how do we make that better connection with business and education, both at the elementary level and high school level, but also at the college level and community college level. And so they put together a Business Education Alliance in order to do that, because it's sharing those best practices and really helping people understand, how you make those inroads, build those partnerships and relationships.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that comes up too with that is that this is ongoing work, because there's turnover too. You might get things in place and then somebody leaves, unfortunately, or so then we need to get somebody else up to speed, or somebody, so it is an ongoing process, I think.
It is an ongoing process. And again, like I mentioned, with the low unemployment rate that we have in the state of Iowa, you have to be diligent about that if you're going to keep ahead of.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the unemployment rate, because that kind of leads us right into our next question that we had, is that according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, we're tied for the 10th lowest unemployment rate in the country. And I mean, that's, when we say 10th, like we're only like 0.7% away from number 2 in the country. So it's like the gap isn't that large. Is the goal to continue chipping away at that number, or is there something like equally important that maybe doesn't get as much focus in the headlines as that people are kind of like aware of as unemployment rate?
I think what we are really focused on, obviously the unemployment rate, but the labor force participation rate. So our labor force participation rate in Iowa was 66.2% compared to 62.9% nationally. So that's the amount of people that are in the workforce at this time. And so I think with the low unemployment rate, we really need to look at that labor force participation rate and understand the subset of people who are not in the workforce. So I think you heard a lot over, the pandemic, people leaving the workforce, which I think is another thing that impacts a company like Hy-Vee, because of those different positions that they have. They don't have as many people to draw on. But of that subset, it's a lot of men that are leaving the workforce. So what are those strategies to help bring them back into the workforce? So I think that's where we have to get, more focused and granular as to who are those subsets that aren't in the workforce and what are our strategies to help bring them back in.
Yeah, I think that's a great focus.
Yeah, and understanding the how to navigate the remote opportunities and what people can offer to maybe gain some of those folks back that are looking for remote opportunities or things like that. There's a lot to it.
Yeah, there is. There's a lot to it. It's like, how do you, once you identify that section of individuals, what is it that appeals to them most to wanting to be in the workforce, just like you said?
Yeah.
Is it that they want a remote position? Is it that they really only want to work 8 to 5? Is it that they, so how are we addressing that and helping them make those connections?
Yeah, absolutely.
No, very good. So one kind of last question is, we got to know you a little bit, which is great. We're just curious, are there any sectors of the workforce that you have a unique or really stronger than other sector's passion for? Like everybody brings kind of their, this is what I love this population, or I love this sector, so we're just curious. Do you have any favorites or?
Well, I'll talk about one, but the first thing I'll say, they're all important.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
We've got that.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
I think that employers really need to look at all sectors in today and be open to all options when they're trying to hire people. So it's, some people come with different barriers, and so how can you work with them to address those barriers? But for me, it's probably more of the younger generation, and this is why. So if you look at the state of Iowa, our population has not grown very much for years and years and years now. Actually, in November, we grew the most that we have in quite some time. So we need to keep our young people in the state of Iowa. And in order to do that, we need to help them understand the opportunities that are here in the state of Iowa. And that's some of the work that I started when I was at the Business Council, and it's really helping students know, what does that career look like, and how do we connect them to an employer to help build on that. I mean, as a kid, you only know what you know. And I always like to give this example because my dad was a civil engineer by trade. And so he would do some land surveying when we were younger. And I got to be the one who held the range pole, which is not fun at all. And so,
really?
No, not fun at all. And so he had said to me, he's like, well, you should think about being an engineer when I was going to go to college. And all I can think about was, I don't want to hold a range pole the rest of my life, But had I had a different experience, or had I actually looked into it, there are probably areas of engineering I would have gone into because I have that numerical mind. And so that's what kids, really base their opinions on today. And so it's, how do we give them that experience when they're in high school and all the way through college, and help them make that connection with a company. And maybe they don't decide to stay here after they go to college and they want to get a little bit of experience in a different state, but then they know what they can come back to at the end of the day. So I think for me, it's really focusing on that set of population, because it helps us either maintain or hopefully grow our population and really make those early connections to help fill the positions that we have in Iowa.
I love that so much, because I think that I have heard many anecdotal examples of how high school students getting connected to local employers in high school and having really amazing experiences. Plus, they gain relationships and mentors.
Yeah. And
whether their plan is to go on to get a post-secondary degree, some of them are doing that and coming back, or they're working in the summers at these employers, or they're finding a career path there. And I want those for all Iowans, because I think if they can find a career path there, there's a lot of them that want to stay, but they just don't know what's available. So that is very exciting.
I mean, I'm facing that with my kids today. So I'm not just picking this because I have kids this age, but because I do believe it helps with some gaps. But I mean, I face this with my kids today. So I'm trying to get them exposure. My son is interested in science and technology and bioscience possibly. So he spent a day at Grain Processing Corporation out in Muscatine to just kind of see, what do biotech scientists do, Or he's also interested in supply chain. So we're trying to get him connected with somebody who does supply chain so that he can just take a look at what that is. And I've got a daughter who's going to graduate and go to college, and she's still not sure what she wants to do. And I'm like, okay, if you could narrow it down a little bit, I could at least, get you engaged with some people.
Yes.
But if you don't have an active parent who's has connections and helping them do that, how else are they making those connections? So I just think
really
it's
important.
I know that businesses are very eager to work with the younger generation, and I think are wanting to provide internships and different things like that. And so we just need to get those students interested in having that connection with them.
Yeah, and like you said, sometimes changing the perception of what a job actually is. Like you hear you hear a job title, and you've got this preconceived notion of this is all that they do, and then you actually get into the company or the industry, and you're like, oh, there's this whole other side of it that I never even thought of. And I mean, there are some events like the Build My Future event is a great one that we have here in Iowa, that where these kids get bussed in from schools all over the place to check out these events and get an idea of like what people are actually doing. I mean, like something as you hear like land surveying, and then all of a sudden they've got these 6 foot wide drones that they're flying around to do land survey work, and like how and not only how industries are now, but like where they're going in the next 10-15 years, getting them exposed to the idea that yes, it might be this one thing now, but like in the future it's going to be this entirely different way of doing this job, and we're going to need people who are passionate about that way to lead us into that.
That makes me think of Vermeer. So Vermeer has their manufacturing day, and they bus in students from all over to take a look at, and then they set up different opportunities for them to walk around, and this is what welding looks like, and this is what this looks like, and this is the future of manufacturing. And these kids leave excited. But just to that point, I mean, just getting them a little bit of exposure and interest to start making that connection, I think is important.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, before we let you go, you mentioned that you were a big sports fan. Kathy and I are both big sports fans. What's your go-to? What do you like to do or play?
Well, I love sports. I played basketball. I played softball. I swam. I did a lot. But it's, people ask me, if you could have any job in the world, what would it be? And I always say the NFL commissioner. So I love football, but I love basketball too. And I love college basketball. And of course, our team is Iowa State. Both my husband and I graduated from Iowa State. But I love watching all sports. I love tennis. I love even boxing. So I just am race car driving. I love Indy race car and NASCAR. I just love sports. Golf, not as much. Sorry.
Ben's a golfer. Ben's a golfer.
What's your NFL team?
Okay, this is a sad one to say, but I have always been a Cowboys fan. And now I'm even frustrated with my dear Cowboys. So I was rough. I'm a Cowboys fan growing up, so I kind of stay a little true to them. And then I appreciate teams based on their coach, believe it or not. So I love Duke basketball, but I've loved Duke basketball since the 80s. But I love Coach K. I just think he's an amazing coach and does a great job with his teams. And so it's just that's kind of how I pick my teams. But I was always a Cowboys.
I should have known with the blue and black. and what's the worst part is that I'm a Maryland alum. So first you hit me with the golf, and now you're like, oh, by the way, I'm a Duke Blue Devil fan. It's just we were going so well.
I know, it's the teams that nobody likes. But if we could just get the Cowboys to come to fruition, that would be nice. But I am rooting for the Lions this year.
Yeah, they're a good story.
I can do that too.
Again, back to the coach and kind of the culture he's built, and so it's exciting to watch that.
Yeah, I'm excited. My boys, I'm a Baltimore Ravens fan. We're in the playoffs, so hoping that Lamar finally puts it together and takes us to the promised land. I'm excited.
MVP candidate.
Oh, he should. I mean, we could have a whole other sports podcast.
Yes, we could. Yes, we could. I've been quiet, as you can see. Yes,
you're a Packers fan.
Exactly. We're not having a great year, so but that's okay. Go Pack, go. That's okay.
All right. Well, Georgia, thank you so much for coming by the podcast. It's great to have you in here, and we can't wait to catch up with you. In a little
glad
bit
you're
to
here.
See how you're adjusting and getting on with it.
Thanks. I appreciate being part of it today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.